Stephen, I'd like to start by asking you to characterize yourself historically in 1984. I mean, professionally, generationally, politically.
Well, I was middle-aged, so I wasn't some child. I had 3 children, and Mrs. Thatcher was in power. You know, I was a working television director, really.
And why had you made that choice to be a television director?
Because the British film industry in the 70s was particularly unfortunate. And you could get, you know, on my level, I could get work at the BBC, and the work at the BBC was rather classy. I mean, I was doing work by Alan Bennett and Tom Stoppard and David Hare and people, so
yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
And also, the continuity and the quantity of work gave you an opportunity to learn your job.
Okay, Stephen, even when you made Gumshoe in 1971, you'd already had 10 years working both in the theatre and film.
Yes.
Can you describe, in a way, the 60s? How and with whom were you working in the 60s? And,
well, I came down from Cambridge, and within a year I was working as an assistant at the Royal Court, which was, you know, it's great theatre. And I knew Lindsay from odd connections, and Lindsay Anderson. And then one day Carol Rice came to direct a play, and Lindsay must have said to him, "Oh, get Stephen to be your assistant." So I went to work with Carol, except the play collapsed, and Carol said, "Come and work on my film," which was a film called Morgan. I'd never been on a film set before.
Oh, so that...
But Carol apparently went back to his wife and said, "I've found someone who'll be a good assistant." I have no idea why, and I hope I didn't let him down.
Well, Morgan, A Suitable Case for Treatment, was actually one of my absolute favourite films
I'm honoured to have been present there.
As a 16-year-old.
Yes.
But Carol Rice is one of the major directors in England in the 60s. Lindsay Anderson is another, and you're the assistant on If.
No, I can see I somehow stumbled into a golden position.
And I think you could describe them in terms of the Royal Court, in terms of theatre.
Well, in terms of theatre, but also in the cinema. They had been responsible for the change in the British cinema. The British cinema changed in the late 50s. Saturday night and Sunday morning, Room at the Top that Jack Clayton did, and The Sporting Life. So they were the principal architects, and I imagine that took a hell of a lot out of them.
But that means you were raised within a kind of socially committed, realist,
literary
drama,
tradition,
and you then went into the BBC, which had exactly the same ethos. How would you define yourself in relation to that tradition? Because that's the tradition you come out of.
Well, it was, you know, you were working with these very, very clever people. I can remember things in my life, like I can remember watching Room at the Top, which was the first time I'd ever seen a film about people. I think it's Sheffield rather than Nottingham, but it looked like my life. And of course, Saturday night and Sunday morning was where I lived, and indeed my brother is an extra in the film. So the connection between life and the cinema was very, very strong.
If we take that Royal Court, Carol Rice, Lindsay Anderson tradition, and actually wider into the BBC, there's a strong feeling that one was engaged in bringing to people's attentions parts of the society that could be made better.
Well, that was, you know, that was all to do with the post-war consensus. And it coincided really with the emergence of Ken Loach, who was very, very brilliant when he was very young. So made these filmed these extraordinary accounts of British working class life. And was a very sort of charismatic figure.
But in the BBC in the 70s, I mean, you must have had discussions in which you aligned yourself in relation to those kind of aims. When you say no, did you say no?
I mean, no.
No.
Because I sneaked into the BBC somehow on Alan Bennett's back. Alan, who was the son of a butcher, therefore rather more working class than many of the people we admired so much, didn't write from that point of view. Indeed, didn't have a great deal of patience with that point of view. But Alan's, again, was brilliant and wrote with a sort of truthfulness and an accuracy, and one that I recognized. But I was always very aware that there's one of the early films I made that Alan wrote, the mother sings about Empire Day, and I thought, oh my goodness, this isn't politically very good. On the other hand, the quality of the writing, of course, was itself made it acceptable. And also Alan's working class credentials somehow outflanked everybody. It all sounds rather silly in retrospect, but no, so I was absolutely not, somehow I couldn't get into I was now, I never made anything that Tony Garnett produced. I couldn't get into that gang.
But nonetheless, Laundrette does seem to me to be part of that tradition.
Well, it is, but in a much more sort of anarchic way, isn't it? All the, the gayness and the way it's shot and things was in a much more freer style.
But, for example, you just made the hit, but at the same time, you didn't say, oh, I'm going to make another film. You said, I'll go back to television, make a...
Well, when Mrs. Thatcher came in, the world began to change. And it began to change for us too, in ways that we didn't really understand. Suddenly, television films got larger because they would give you tax breaks. And then, of course, Channel 4 was invented. Now, Mrs. Thatcher herself was responsible for Channel 4, so all praise to a wise, great woman. She did it because, actually, she wanted to turn us on to small businessmen, an enterprise in which she was entirely successful.
But at the same time, when you come to make Laundrette, you're making it as a television film.
Well, first of all, I was in dispute with my friends who were making these quite small subjects into films without success. So I said, quite sensibly but quite cautiously, listen, this is a television film. I've been doing this, I've been doing work like this for years. Let us turn our backs on the cinema,
right.
Which was itself an iconoclastic thing to say.
But you then also made the decision to shoot on 16
Yes,
mil.
because that's what television films were shot on.
Yeah.
And it eliminated, or it made it even harder the notion that it was for the cinema.
Right.
So that was what I was mainly attacking. I was always very, very nervous about taking projects that on the surface were unsuitable into the cinema.
Right, right.
Because my friends had suffered quite selfishly, because my friends had suffered so much from that.
So there's this famous mythical moment when, according to Hanif, he goes round to Talbot Road and sticks...
Why do you call it mythic? Oh, mythic doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Well, I'm asking, did it happen?
I got a phone call from, I can't quite remember, I think I know who it was from, but I won't say, saying, there's this boy who wants to get a script to you. I said, sure, well, I had nothing to lose. And so the script was brought around and put through my letterbox.
And did you read it and say, wow, this is it?
I read it and my heart sank when I realized it was about the Pakistani community, because I thought, oh, this is going to be a sort of bleeding heart film. And then I started to laugh.
Yeah.
So I went from racist to liberal in one stroke.
But the script appears through your letterbox. And shortly after that, a 25-year-old...
No, he was in his 30s.
He's in his 30s, but someone much younger than you arrives in the door. How did that affect your life?
Well, firstly, I thought he was somebody else. There was a bloke at Channel 4 who dealt with ethnic affairs called Farouk Dondi, and I assumed it was him, but this is just emphasizing my racist credentials. And then he slowly explained the script. He explained who these people were, where it had come from. He must at some point have told me about being at school and a white friend of his coming in one day with his head shaved. He certainly told me about his uncle who wanted to open a nightclub in the lavatory in Shepherd's Bush Green. I mean, was the scale of the whole thing started to emerge.
And did he take you around? Did he take you around his family? How did he...
No.
He just talked?
He would talk, yes. And he was so mischievous and lively. I mean, if you ask Hanif, he'll say, oh, particularly if he's drunk or feeling particularly unpleasant, he'll say, oh, well, you always just like the exoticism of it, which may well be true, but what do I know?
Now, let's take the subject matter. You were not unusual in opening a script about a Pakistani and thinking, oh, this is going to be a, one of those, because I think I'm right in saying that almost without exception, any film set with black or brown characters had been about police oppression,
Sort of,
racism, etc. This really was the first script that wasn't, I mean, all of those things were in it, but it wasn't about
And
that.
I remember a gay boy in Brixton saying, thank you for the film. And I said, why? He said, because you don't show us to be mad and we don't end up dead. Or I said, oh dear, I'm making prick up your ears next. Shall I leave the death sound? He said, oh no. So, yeah, I guess so. No, you're right.
And what immediately attracts you to it?
I thought it was very, very good on, I mean, this is how stupid I am, Thatcherite economics.
Yeah. Somehow it did all fit into that Thatcherite moment where money, I mean, the city is deregulated and suddenly money's just flowing through the streets.
Well, and the idea of immigrants making money out of drugs and out of laundrettes and somehow inverting the Thatcherite norms. That was very, very good. I didn't notice that it was a gay film.
From script to film, I'm told that a lot of the script was cut out and that the film was edited down from a much longer version.
I don't think so. I mean, I think we tried to rewrite it, and the designer said, why, this was really good before, why are you trying to spoil it? I don't think, I mean, I don't remember. Hanif says, I said, make it dirtier, which rather startled him. I remember on the first day, there's a scene when Dan is up a ladder and the white boys are all looking at him because he's working for a Pakistani. So this is a scene of absolute contempt. And Dan comes down the ladder and he and the Pakistani boy embraced. And while Dan's head was concealed from his white friends, I said, lick his ear. Dan looked at me as if the devil had appeared in his life and licked it, and his eyes lit up and he licked his ear. I think I'd got that from the Royal Court. So the Royal Court always had another stream going on underneath. Underneath the highbrow thing, there was a sort of hooligan element knocking around. And Hanif somehow, maybe I brought the hooligan element to life.
How did you cast him? I mean, that is his first film, isn't it?
No, he'd been in Mutiny of the Bounty.
And Gandhi.
He was in Sunday Bloody Sunday, yes. He was a veteran.
Yeah.
He was a veteran.
Well, it's his first starring role.
The girls all said, there was a list of 4 actors. Dan Day-Lewis, Tim Roth, who I just worked with in The Hit, Gary Oldman, who said he'd played the part already on television, and Ken Branagh, who was desperate for it, I discovered. And the girls all said, oh, you want Dan? Because he was what was known as top of the crumpet list of the Royal Court. He was just sexier than anybody else. So, and then I said, well, I'm not going to cast him until I get the other boy as well. I'll cast them both, which drove Dan senseless. That's when he went around London with a knife threatening to kill me. Dan somehow knew that this was what he'd been looking for.
But then he turns up, and at the end, he's a star. So how did that happen?
Well, I don't think any of us thought he was going to be a star. It was outside our experience. The cinema playing around, the film playing around the world was outside it. Nobody had any idea that these possibilities existed. And Dan really became a star because he played in The Laundrette and then went off and did A Room with a View. And people in New York said, how can a man play these 2 parts? And you say, well, he's an actor, that's what they do. But, so none of us.
But you must have realised by the end of the film that you had a really astonishing...
I always thought he was jolly good. I mean, I wish I could say I stood there saying, but I didn't. I didn't pay him special attention because he was going to be a big star. You just got on with the film. And it was, Dan joined in the ensemble. So he wasn't being demanding or anything like that. He was just very good. I remember we were doing a scene in a tunnel when Johnny and Omar first meet. And there was a lamp stand. And I remember Dan going and standing on it, and he looked like Marlene Dietrich. And I thought, all right, you want to play Mr. Tart, I'll photograph it. He just looked dazzling, draped around a lamppost, and it's in the film. Shocking, really. I should have stopped him.
Can we move on just to a kind of another aspect of this, which is that I think you're relatively famous for kind of denying auteurship, which is...
How can I be the auteur of a film about a culture that I'm not a member of? That's questionable.
I'm sorry.
I said to Hanif, shall I do research? He said, no, these people are just like you.
I ask you if you're an auteur and ask about writers, and you say, how can I be an auteur if I'm making a film about a culture I don't understand? To which the answer is very simple. You're an auteur because the take that you take on that culture is a kind of stylistically and thematically linked to your other films. Well, the question really is the relationship. You have very close relationships with writers. Is that?
Yes.
Was that a decision from early on, or was that just how it came out and now you stick to it?
I came from the Royal Court, which was a writer's theatre. The BBC was a writer's medium, at the time was a writer's medium. I mean, what was interesting was learning it all. I had to have the whole history of colonialism and post-colonialism explained. And I remember saying to Hanif, well, should we be making it about sort of ships coming from Karachi, bringing all these people? And should it be like Godfather 2, or should it be this silly little film in South London? And we decided, mercifully, silly little film in South London. But I had to have all that explained. And then I always learn a lot from the actors, and they come in and tell me what it's about. I remember a woman coming in and saying, no, a woman who I think was Persian, coming in and saying, no, we're all a sort of cocktail. And gradually you realized who these people were. In fact, I don't think there's a single Pakistani in the film. Do I mean that? It's not in the central parts. I don't think any of them are Pakistani.
They're Indians or Persians.
Indians. The woman is Persian. Gordon,
And this is Cherry.
I think he's Guyanan. It was, fortunately nobody questioned. Those days you could get away with things like that. Now you'd be taken out and shot. But I can see that auteurism operates on an unconscious level as well.
Yeah. In terms of the development of the script, legend has it that Shirley Ann Field was not happy with her role. Could you describe what the role was and how you got from that role to the brilliant role in the film?
The truth is, I'd thought of Shirley Ann, and then thought, no. And then I spent 6 weeks trying to do better, and then one day someone said, you should cut Shirley Ann Field. You say, oh, you're absolutely right. So we went to Shirley Ann, and then Shirley Ann said, well, it's not good enough. And I wasn't present, but apparently she stood over Hanif with the words, if you want me to wear red underwear, you better write this better, and turned it into a good part. But I like all of that. I like the actors contributing stuff like that. I mean, it absolutely supports the film. It's not disruptive. I mean,
and also it's a very moving.
Yes,
it makes both
yes,
the end of their
yes,
affair is unbearably moving.
And of course, Shirley Ann had been in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. She'd been in plays that Lindsay had directed. So she was absolutely part of a tradition I understood. Yeah.
There's two great performances with Roshan and Saeed as the two very different brothers. Did you know them? Did they come out of worlds that you knew, or were they?
Well, I'd seen Saeed Jaffrey. He was very, very good in a BBC film called Gangsters about smuggling immigrants. And Roshan Seth had been in my friend David Hare's plays, and I think he's in Gandhi, isn't he? I think he plays Nehru. So there were two. I mean, I don't know that there were many more. There was the man with the beard. He's a wonderful actor. And there were two boys that I saw for Gordon, for Omar. Right. So there wasn't thousands of actors. There was enough actors to make the film, extremely good actors to make the film. I remember Saeed one day. Saeed had played in Passage to India on Broadway. And he said, I can't come tomorrow. I've got David Lean, there's a press launch for Passage to India. I have to go. I said, of course. So he went and he came back looking rather crestfallen. I said, why? He said, because someone said to David Lean, why have you cast Alec Guinness to play in Indian? And Lean had said, because I couldn't find an Indian actor good enough. I mean, the sort of casual insults that they have to put up with.
And
Passage to India was playing. The first time we ever screened the film was at BAFTA. And Passage to India was showing in the main cinema. And we were in some small little cinema previewing the film. And I kept saying, go and get the projectionist to mix up the reels. See if they notice.
Laundrette is kind of a really huge moment in British cinema history, partly because it brings you out of television into the cinema, partly because it reveals Hanif Qureshi as one of the most interesting writers of our time, but partly also because it's the launch film for the most successful British production company ever, Working Title. Could you describe to us what your early relationship with a Working Title?
I was asked to do a video of a pop group. And I said to my agent, I don't know how you do that. And she said, well, there's this boy who looked after Nick Rogue. So Tim appeared in my life. And I did the video, and I doubt it was terribly good. But at some point, and then I think I did another one, but at some point, the script of The Laundrette arrived, and I gave it to Tim, saying, you better produce this.
I mean, that's a very risky decision, isn't it, Stephen? Tim was what age? Tim was 25.
Tim says he was 24, but perhaps he was lying. I don't know. I could see it was rather a carefree decision, but you'd have to say quite a good one. It seemed to me it was an iconoclastic film, so why not be iconoclastic on every level? And anyway, the people I was more concerned with attacking my close friends than...
I see, so it is.
So it had quite a lot of malice in it, but all these new people suddenly appeared. You know, the crews that made these pop promos were people I'd never come across before, so it was very, very interesting. I remember they all came up and asked me to sign their union application forms, which you had to do in those days. So it was a sort of new world to me, and that seemed rather interesting, and Oliver was part of that.
The film was the first film that you worked with Oliver Stapleton on?
Yes.
And you made 8 further films with him?
Yes.
How would you describe that relation? That's a very close working relationship over a long period of time.
Actually, I'd done a short film with him. I did a comic strip film with him. And he said on the first day, there was a shot of a car arriving outside a house. And he was a lot younger than me, Oliver. And he went and lay on the floor, and I said to him, what on earth are you doing down there? And he suddenly realized there was another way of making film, that he'd been making these rather ridiculous, you know, these comic, whatever it is. Yeah. He said, this man saying, why are you down there? He thought, oh, I see. He just seemed a very bright guy. He shot Laundrette wonderfully. He shot The Grifters wonderfully.
But I've also heard you complain about cinematographers as the people who persecute.
Well, they're tyrannical bastards, if that's what you mean, yes. You work with Chris Menges. Let's put the camera... Chris would be coming up to you in the middle of a take saying, oh, it's much better from over here. He's also brilliant.
But do you think of the relationship with the cinematographer as collaborative, or...?
Nowadays, it's entirely submissive on my part. Cameramen are so clever. I mean, they're also generous and they have good qualities as well as dodgy ones. They're so clever, so you redefine it slightly. I mean, I've spent my life working with very, very clever cameramen, and I always think I've been taught by clever cameramen, including Chris, well, Oliver. It was different on The Laundrette. Suddenly I was the oldest person on the crew. I'd never been the oldest person before.
How was the film shot in production terms? I mean, did you have a very rigid schedule and you knew exactly what you were doing, or was there quite a lot of fluidity in how you actually shot?
Well, we shot it in 6 weeks. We just got on with it. You know, what I learned at the BBC was they would leave you alone. You had 21 days, and that was the end of it. So already I had slightly more time. But you couldn't, you know, if you wanted to do carefully designed shots, that possibility didn't exist.
But you
so
did...
you became very, very good at, oh, look, I remember once on a film, I think it was on The Snapper, and we were doing a scene of a picnic, and there was thick fog. And the actor said, what happens now? I said, well, if the fog lifts, it's a picnic on a nice day, and if it doesn't lift, it's counterpoint. What do you want me to do? We had to film it that day, there was thick fog. I mean, you'd simply adapt to the circumstances.
But no carefully designed shots, but you had a crane one day. How did you have a crane?
Well, you order a crane. At the BBC, we would always order a crane for one day just to sort of play with it and practice on it. And there was one day, and I came back after lunch and said, what's that crane doing here? Well, you ordered it, Governor. And they produced a piece of paper signed in triplicate with my name on it. So I remember having to improvise a shot. And that's when the camera went over the building, like a Western. That's what you learned at the BBC. You have this, but you know, you can make a film or not. If you don't want to make a film, don't make it.
I always think that in some ways, filmmaking is about really radical contingency. I mean, the weather is the best example of that.
There's a wonderful at the end of the Truffaut film that he made here, the one about Fahrenheit.
451.
Fahrenheit. There's a scene in the snow, and people described how they arrived that morning and said to Truffaut, well, we better go home now. And Truffaut said, why? It's absolutely wonderful. And I did that on Philomena when it froze, and I said, now I know how to end the film, because God or the weather or whatever it was had shifted and given you something to photograph.
Yeah. How much of the script dictated what we see on the screen, and how much were you, as it were, improvising on the set?
I mean, it wasn't at all improvised.
Well, okay, can I take the thing, the single shot which seems to be the most brilliant, which is the boys flicking water on each other at the end. Was that written?
I think that was improvised. That's really all to do with Ford, isn't it? It's the end shot of the searchers. And the door closes. We had a lot of trouble with the ending. I said you had to have a happy ending because you become so involved with these boys. But of course, you know, the film it contains so much tragedy and drug dealing and things. I mean, you know, it's outrageous to have a happy ending. Anyway, and then we found it in the last few seconds.
And I do remember myself at the first screenings at Edinburgh, and immediately people were saying this must go into the cinema, but you were the last to be converted, weren't you?
Yeah, well, two people. I was one of the two last. The other last person was the woman who eventually took it into the cinema, a woman called Romaine Hart. She said, well, I'll give you a week.
Yeah.
You'll get a week out of the Laundrette.
Yeah.
And then she read the review of Derek Malcolm wrote saying, this is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And then it played for several months.
Yeah.
It was incremental, which turned out to be, of course, extremely sensible.
My Beautiful Laundrette kind of catapulted you into the public eye. I mean, people who knew about the cinema and television knew who you were, but now suddenly you were a figure. And you were a figure in relation to race. And
yes. God help us.
Even though you'd made this a film from this kind of anarchic point of view, it was immediately taken up from a less anarchic point of view as a major breakthrough in the representation of immigrant communities. How did you feel about that?
Well, I probably wasn't terribly aware of it, but I can see it. I mean, I could see the fraudulence of the whole thing. The truth is, I thought it was Hamlet. I just thought it was a boy rebelling against his father or his parents' generation. So I didn't quite realize there was this subtext. The gay stuff all came from working at the court in the 60s. So I'd seen that with my own eyes. I remember I must have been teaching at the film school, and there must have been someone whose parents were immigrants. And he said, well, I was very shocked by the film. And that was the first time I realized that there was another point of view. And if you said to me now, would the film get made? I guess you wouldn't have the balls to make it now, because we know too much. You know, we've lived through the fatwa and we've lived through even Charlie, you know, all that stuff. So you wouldn't make it. In those days, it was made in complete innocence. And when I tell stories of my ignorance of race, oddly enough, you think, well, I can see that was a sort of real blessing because it meant that it was completely uninhibited and it wasn't nervous at all. Once you realize that there was, you know, that however disgusting the fatwa was and the book burning in Bradford, there were these people who held these opinions, and, you know, I guess people have the right to hold opinions, but not to behave that badly. You immediately start to censor yourself. So fortunately, it came at a time when I didn't know enough to censor myself.
I can't ask you in. You better get back to your father. I didn't think you'd ever mention him. He helped me, didn't he?
I think that from the Laundrette through to the grifters, I think they're all in a sort of straight line. Somewhere in my unconscious, and I promise you it was in my unconscious, there was a connection between gay people, immigrants, women, and some sort of opposition to Mrs. Thatcher, opposition to the government in this country. And then it stopped. I went to Hollywood, and that was sort of the end of it. I remember.
Also, Mrs. Thatcher went.
Well, yes, thank God. Mrs. Thatcher went, but for all those films, they all seem to be taking the same point of view of these. If you make films about these people, they are all an affront to the establishment. And when I eventually worked that out, I thought that was very, very interesting. And when I went to Hollywood to make Accidental Hero with Dustin, I remember somebody said to me, which was a studio film, somebody said to me, "Oh, you should have been here last night. The Grifters won the prize for the best independent film." And I said, "Oh, I see, the prize for winning the best independent film is that you get to give up your independence."